What if I told you that the way men treat you has less to do with them and everything to do with how you treat yourself? This may sound harsh, but it's the truth. Men mirror the standards you set, not the ones you talk about, but the ones you live by. In this video, we're going to unpack the 4 subtle but powerful rules that instantly shift how men perceive you. But before we get into the tactics, let's get honest. Respect doesn't start when he texts back, commits, or gives you flowers. It starts the moment you decide you're no longer available for anything less than alignment. Respect isn't demanded, it's inspired. And here's the secret no one talks about. A woman who deeply respects herself teaches the world how to treat her without saying a word. Maybe you've been in relationships where you felt like you were giving everything and getting crumbs. Maybe you've waited for a man to wake up and see your worth. But here's the truth. Men wake up fast when they realize a woman holds herself to standards they can't manipulate. This video isn't about playing games. It's about activating a part of you that's been silent. Your core feminine power. The part that doesn't chase, doesn't explain, and doesn't fear walking away. Because when you embody self-respect, you stop asking for his. And that's when everything changes. So let's begin, because the woman you're about to become is no longer available for disrespect, ever again. Let's be real, one of the fastest ways women lose a man's respect is by over-explaining themselves. When you constantly justify your decisions, your feelings, your standards, you're unknowingly sending a message that says, please accept me, please don't be upset, please understand where I'm coming from. And that energy, it's the opposite of power. It's rooted in fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being rejected, fear of being alone. But here's the truth. A woman who truly respects herself doesn't explain her worth. She just lives it. She sets the tone through her actions, not paragraphs. She doesn't beg to be seen. She doesn't overcompensate when someone questions her. She doesn't dilute her standards to make someone else comfortable. And when a man senses that, he steps into a different level of respect. Men don't fall in love with women who constantly prove themselves. They fall for the ones who are unapologetic about who they are, because that kind of confidence is rare. And men are wired to value what feels rare. When you say something like, I don't tolerate inconsistent communication, and he pushes back or asks why, you don't need to defend it with a backstory or people-pleasing tone. You simply say, that's just not what I'm available for, and let that be enough. The more you explain, the more power you give away. You shift the dynamic from self-leadership to seeking validation. And once a man senses that your boundaries are up for negotiation, he stops taking them seriously. That's why it's so important to stay grounded in your truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs you his approval. Some women are so afraid of coming off as rude or too much that they over-explain to smooth out any possible friction. But respect doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being aligned. And alignment means knowing that not everyone will agree with you, and being okay with that. In fact, your ability to stand firm without over-explaining becomes the very thing that separates you from the rest. It shows him that you don't fear his rejection, because you're not building your value off his reaction. Silence, when used correctly, is power. When you don't fill every moment with explanations, your presence becomes more grounded, more mysterious, more powerful. A woman who doesn't over-explain herself teaches people, especially men, to take her at her word. And that quiet certainty, that's magnetic. You're not on trial. You don't need to justify why you want commitment, clarity, or consistency. You simply decide that these are your non-negotiables, and let your behavior reflect that. The right man won't need a 10-step presentation to understand your boundaries. He'll feel it. And if he doesn't, you'll walk without making a speech about it. So if there's one rule that immediately changes how men see you, it's this: stop explaining yourself. You'll be amazed at how quickly people rise to meet your energy when you stop lowering it just to be understood. Most women know when something doesn't feel right, but instead of walking away, they wait, they hope, they try harder, they convince themselves to stay just a little longer, because maybe he'll change, maybe he'll wake up, maybe things will finally click. But let's be honest, deep down, You always know when it's not aligned. Walking away isn't about punishing someone, it's about protecting your peace. When a connection no longer feels mutual, clear, or emotionally safe, staying becomes self-abandonment. And the longer you stay in something that doesn't reflect your values or standards, the more you start questioning your own worth. That's where self-doubt creeps in. That's where your energy starts to shift. That's when you stop glowing. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. Alignment isn't about potential. It's not about what could be one day. It's about what's happening right now. Is he showing up consistently? Is the connection reciprocal? Do his actions match his words? If the answer is no, that's your clarity. You don't need more time. You need more self-trust. Walking away when it's not aligned is the ultimate form of self-respect. It says, I refuse to stay anywhere I'm not valued. And that energy, that's unforgettable. Because the moment a woman decides that her peace matters more than her fear of being alone, she becomes unstoppable. She no longer waits for crumbs. She no longer tolerates confusion. She no longer entertains half-love. Men deeply respect women who walk away with grace. Not out of anger. Not with drama. But with calm, quiet certainty. When a man sees that you're not afraid to leave the table when your needs aren't being met, it shifts the power dynamic instantly. He realizes you're not emotionally dependent on his effort. You're rooted in your own standards, and that makes you rare. Some women confuse walking away with giving up, but it's the opposite. Giving up is when you settle for less than you deserve. Walking away is what you do when you finally realize that staying would cost you your dignity. It's what you do when you realize that almost right is still wrong. Even if it hurts, even if you have feelings, even if it's inconvenient. The longer you stay where your soul feels small, the further you drift from the version of you that's meant to thrive. Every time you walk away from what isn't aligned, you make space for what is. A man who sees you clearly, meets you fully, and respects you deeply without needing to be convinced. So if the energy feels off, the clarity isn't there, or your spirit feels unsettled, don't talk yourself into staying. Don't rationalize misalignment. Don't shrink to fit. Your standards are not too high. Your intuition is not too loud. Your boundaries are not too much. The moment you decide to walk away for the last time, not with bitterness but with peace, you'll feel your power return. And once you've felt that kind of freedom, you'll never settle again. If there's one trait that instantly shifts how men treat you, it's emotional detachment, not coldness, not numbness, but a calm inner stillness that doesn't get rattled by mixed signals, late replies, or breadcrumb behavior. Emotional detachment is not about shutting down your heart. It's about choosing not to give your power away to every fleeting feeling or every man who shows interest. Most women confuse emotional detachment with being aloof or distant, but it's actually the opposite. It's the ability to care deeply without losing yourself. It's staying open but anchored, present but not desperate, connected but not consumed. And when a woman moves through the world with that energy, everything changes. Men can sense when a woman is emotionally reactive. It shows up in the way she waits anxiously for his replies, in how she overanalyzes every word, in how she panics when things feel uncertain. That energy creates pressure, and pressure doesn't inspire devotion, it pushes people away. Now, contrast that with a woman who is emotionally detached in the healthiest sense. She observes instead of reacting. She doesn't chase clarity, she allows it to reveal itself. She doesn't try to control outcomes, she lets alignment do the filtering. She knows that if he's for her, he won't need to be chased, and if he's not, nothing she says will make him stay. That kind of self-possession is magnetic. It triggers curiosity, it commands respect, because she's no longer performing for love. She's not bending herself to fit a mold. She's not addicted to potential or fantasy. She's rooted in her value, and her emotions don't dictate her choices. Here's the truth. When a man realizes you are emotionally stable, that you're not reactive to his hot and cold behavior, that you don't need him to validate you, he steps into a different energy. He knows you're not easily impressed, and that if he wants access to your heart, he'll have to earn it with consistency, not charm. Detachment creates space. It gives you clarity. It allows you to respond instead of react. When you're emotionally detached, you're not waiting for him to define the connection. You're watching how he shows up. You're letting his actions speak for themselves. And in that space, you start to see patterns clearly. You stop settling for words. You start aligning with truth. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. You still experience love, hope, attraction, excitement, but you don't let those feelings override logic. You don't let chemistry blind you to red flags. You don't let desire trap you in loops of waiting, chasing, or explaining. When a woman masters emotional detachment, she stops fighting for what's not flowing. She stops rewriting her standards to keep someone in her life. She trusts that what's meant for her will feel calm, neutral, and certain, and anything else is just noise. And here's the most beautiful part. Emotional detachment allows you to leave with grace. You no longer need closure, revenge, or explanations. You can walk away with a peaceful heart, knowing you chose yourself, again and again. This kind of strength doesn't make you unlovable, it makes you unforgettable, because the right man won't be turned off by your detachment. He'll be inspired by it. He'll feel safe, knowing you're not needy, that your emotions don't control you, and that your presence is a gift, not a request. So if you've ever felt exhausted from over-caring, over-investing, or overthinking, this is your wake-up call. Emotional detachment isn't about being cold, it's about being conscious. It's about knowing that your heart is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it just because they showed interest. Detach to protect your peace. Detach to gain perspective. Detach so you can finally see who's really for you. Because the moment you stop reacting to everything, you start reclaiming everything. There's a huge difference between a boundary and an ultimatum. And knowing that difference changes everything in how men respond to you. Ultimatums are loud. Boundaries are quiet. Ultimatums try to control someone else. Boundaries protect you. And a high-value woman always leads with boundaries, not threats. You've probably heard or maybe even said something like, "If you don't commit, I'm leaving," or "If you don't change, we're done." That's an ultimatum. It comes from frustration, from trying to force clarity, when deep down, you already know the truth. But here's the thing, when you have to threaten someone to get them to show up, their respect for you is already fractured. Boundaries, on the other hand, are rooted in self-respect. They don't need a warning label. They don't need a dramatic conversation. They're enforced through quiet, consistent action. A boundary sounds like, "I'm not available for inconsistent energy," and then if that energy continues, you remove yourself without fanfare. When a man feels you leading with ultimatums, it triggers resistance. It makes him feel like he's being controlled or cornered. But when a man feels you leading with boundaries, it makes him respect you, because it tells him you're not trying to change him, you're just clear on what you will and won't participate in. That kind of energy is powerful. It's mature, it's rare, and it completely shifts the dynamic. Most women lead with ultimatums because they're scared. Scared of wasting time, of getting hurt again, of not being chosen. So they push, they warn, they try to get ahead of the pain. But what ends up happening is the opposite. They create resistance, not results. When you lead with boundaries, you give people the opportunity to show you who they really are without pressure. You observe instead of convince. You don't demand change, you respond to patterns. And if the behavior doesn't align with your values, you simply remove yourself, quietly, confidently, without needing him to agree. And that silence, that calm withdrawal, that's what makes the greatest impact. It also protects your peace. You're no longer entangled in emotional tug-of-war. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to be understood. You're simply living by your truth. And whoever can't meet you there is naturally filtered out. Men deeply respect women who lead with boundaries, not because they're hard or aggressive, but because they're clear. Clarity is rare. Most people tolerate disrespect, inconsistency, and confusion because they fear being alone. But when a man meets a woman who doesn't, who's not afraid to walk away from anything that disrupts her peace, he sees her differently. He knows she's not driven by fear. She's guided by values. She's not looking for someone to complete her. She's filtering for someone who complements her. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to issue warnings to be taken seriously. You just need to know what you're available for and live like it. So ask yourself, what have you been tolerating and calling it patience? What have you been threatening to leave but haven't truly detached from? What would shift if you stopped using ultimatums and started embodying boundaries? You don't need to control anyone. You just need to control what you allow, because when your energy says, "I won't fight for a place in someone's life," you free yourself. You stop forcing, you start flowing, and that's when the right person feels safe, seen, and inspired to rise. Lead with boundaries, let your actions speak, and let those who aren't aligned remove themselves, no pressure required. Let's talk about what actually happens when a woman applies these 4 rules in real life. Because this isn't just theory, it's transformation. And the women who've stepped into these shifts, their stories are proof that respect, love, and peace come naturally when you choose yourself first. One woman, let's call her Sarah, used to be the classic over-explainer. She constantly felt like she needed to justify her needs, her feelings, even her silence. Every time a man pulled away, she'd chase the conversation, trying to fix things, trying to be understood. It drained her. She felt anxious, invisible, and like she had to work for love. But something shifted when she stopped explaining and started observing. Instead of sending long texts defending herself, she learned to say less and let her boundaries do the talking. The results were instant. The man she was dating suddenly started leaning in. He became more curious, more consistent, because the energy had shifted. She was no longer seeking his validation. She had become the chooser, and he felt it. Then there's Amira. She was in a situationship for over a year. He kept saying he wasn't ready, but acted like her boyfriend. She kept hoping he'd commit, but every few weeks he'd pull away. When she finally applied Rule #2 and walked away because it wasn't aligned, without a dramatic exit, just quiet clarity, he panicked. But instead of going back, she stayed grounded. She said, "This doesn't feel mutual anymore. I'm done choosing someone who's unsure about me." That one decision changed her entire life. She didn't just leave a man, she left the version of herself who begged to be chosen. Fast forward 6 months, she met someone new. Someone emotionally available, clear in his intentions, and ready for real partnership. She told me, "If I hadn't walked away from what wasn't aligned, I would have never made space for what is." Now there's also Lena. Her transformation was all about emotional detachment. She used to spiral over every message. If a guy took hours to respond, she would question herself, replay every word. She gave her peace away, like it was nothing. But once she learned how to hold space for her feelings without becoming consumed by them, everything changed. She started showing up differently. Calm, grounded, unbothered. The men she dated suddenly respected her space more. One even told her, "There's something about you that makes me want to do better." That's the power of detachment. It inspires rather than demands. And finally, Maya. She was always giving ultimatums, begging for clarity, asking for commitment, threatening to leave. But it only created tension. Until one day, she stopped issuing warnings and started living her boundaries. When her boyfriend ghosted her for 3 days, she didn't argue. She didn't send paragraphs, she simply didn't respond. When he finally reached out, she calmly told him, "This isn't the kind of relationship I want to participate in. I wish you well." That was it. And you know what happened? He called 2 weeks later, completely changed. But by then she had already moved on. Because her peace wasn't up for negotiation anymore. These stories are just a few examples of what happens when a woman steps into her power. Not by being louder, not by being harsher, but by becoming clear, grounded, and unapologetically aligned with her truth. When you apply these 4 rules, it's not just about getting respect from men, it's about giving respect to yourself. And when you do that, the entire world starts treating you differently. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being conscious. Every small choice adds up, every boundary held, every moment you choose to walk instead of chase. That's where the transformation begins. You are not here to prove your worth, you are here to embody it. And when you do, love meets you at your level. If you've made it this far, you already know. This isn't about playing games. It's about becoming the kind of woman who doesn't have to demand respect, because her energy makes it non-negotiable. And the truth is, high-value energy isn't something you turn on when dating. It's something you live and breathe every single day. So how do you embody that energy consistently, even when it's hard, even when your feelings are loud, your patience is thin, or you're tempted to fall back into old patterns? The first tip is this: regulate your emotions before you respond to anything. High-value women don't react from impulse. They pause, they reflect, they choose their response intentionally. That pause alone can change everything. Whether it's a delayed text, confusing behavior, or a triggering comment, your power is in your stillness. The ability to not respond immediately doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. Second, start every day by anchoring yourself in your values. Write them down, read them out loud. Say to yourself, I don't chase energy, I don't explain basic boundaries, I don't shrink to be liked. That repetition becomes your foundation. The more you repeat it, the more it becomes your default. Because high-value energy is about emotional muscle memory. It's who you train yourself to be even when no one's watching. Next, audit your environment. Are you surrounded by people who drain you? Conversations that lower your standards? Social media that makes you question your worth? High-value energy can't thrive in low-vibration spaces. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Curate your inputs so that your mindset stays elevated and grounded in truth. Another tip: never explain your standards to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. When you feel the urge to defend yourself, stop. Ask yourself, do I need to be heard, or do I need to be respected? Respect doesn't come from long explanations. It comes from aligned action. Walk in your values, let people meet you there, or exit on their own. Also, practice detachment daily. Let go of the illusion that you have to hold everything together. What flows, stays. What resists, reveals. When you live by that truth, your energy softens, your nervous system calms. You begin to trust that alignment doesn't need to be forced, it needs to be allowed. And finally, remind yourself that you're not here to prove your worth to anyone. You are here to remember it, over and over again. That's the core of high-value energy. It's not external. It's not based on how others treat you. It's based on how you treat yourself when no one's watching. The way you speak to yourself in the mirror. The standards you hold even when you're tempted to lower them. The dignity you preserve even when your heart wants to chase. Being a high-value woman isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's the discipline to stay rooted in self-worth on the days when it's tempting to settle. And trust me, every time you choose self-respect over emotional chaos, you rewrite your story. So here's your final reminder. You don't have to do anything extra to be worthy. You don't need to beg, bend, or break yourself to be loved. You only need to remember who you are and act like it. Lead with calm, move with clarity, protect your peace, and walk with the quiet confidence that says, I'm not for everyone, but I am always for myself. That's what makes you magnetic. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's how you embody high-value energy every single day.